Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com. Hi, my name is Divya. Before you get to today's show, I've got a quick favour to ask. If you've been enjoying our conversations, I'd love if you could take just 1 minute to leave us a review on the platform that you're listening to us on and share our work to friends and family.
Welcome back to the show. Now, as you know, as part of our brand platform, we have a look at the big ideas taking shape right the way across the globe. And nothing can be more pressing than the ideas of sustainability. Now, you followed my journey through Uruguay, where we had a look at what free zones are doing and not just having a look at the opportunities when it comes to concessions, but also the big ideas shaping those regions. But now I'm going to turn my spectrum to an island that is very close to my heart and to a guest who's been on the show and also gets the podcast and is a dear friend of mine, Premier Mark Brantley from Nevis. Now, what's really interesting about this one in particular is the idea of bringing together sustainability with the SPV of a specialized economic free zone. Now, we often hear this across the globe, but very rarely do we see it in action. And something that Mark's been looking to bring forward now through the legislative changes in Nevis, but also bringing this early adoption, is to instrument this in this incredible island right in the middle of the West Indies. So, Mark, without further ado, it is a pleasure to have you on today.
So thank you for having me, brother. It's good to be back. And certainly I want to commend you on all the excellent work you've been doing with this podcast. I've seen it grown, and I am hoping that it continues to grow. It's really shaping not global opinion, not just local opinion, but global opinion. So kudos to you and your team. And I'm happy that you've given me the privilege of being here with you again. The idea of sustainability is at the heart of all that we do in St. Kitts and Nevis. Of course, we are the smallest country in this hemisphere. And so it is important for us to take sustainability seriously. We are not just talking about it, we are actually living it. We are practicing it in everything we do. And we are mainstreaming sustainability throughout all aspects of our development, our economy, our education system, our healthcare system, our housing, whatever we do, sustainability is at the core. And so this idea of special economic zones, as you say, you've been to other parts of the world, whether it's Uruguay, whether it's Honduras, or even the UAE and Dubai, the DIFC is a good example. In China, you name it, these zones have existed. In fact, they've existed in Jamaica, in the Caribbean since the 1960s. The idea then is not new. What we are seeking to do, however, is quite novel because we are twinning the economic impact that we anticipate from this zone with sustainability. So we are saying to potential zone operators that this is not just about the economy, this is also about building in the infrastructure that will allow us to achieve that sustainable island state status that we have been seeking. So, for example, people who are interested in these zones, developers, there are a number of preconditions that they must satisfy legislatively, which speak not only to the economic impact, they have to produce an economic impact report from a reputable international firm. They must also demonstrate that they will produce their own water. They must demonstrate how they're going to generate electricity, up to 70% of which must be renewable. They must demonstrate, of course, how they will finance their infrastructural improvements within their zone. They must demonstrate how they're going to provide healthcare, how they're going to deal with waste management. And they must demonstrate that they have a plan that is efficacious in dealing with heritage sites, if there are any within that zone, in dealing with historic sites, and of course, in dealing with the environment. So it's if you will, the first attempt that we are aware of globally to bring the principles of sustainability into play in determining how we move forward with the economy and with the economic advancement of the country. So I think it's a very interesting idea and one that we're looking to. We already have tremendous interest being shown in these zones. The legislation was only passed a month ago on the 11th of August, but already there is tremendous interest. And I'm so happy that I have the opportunity to discuss some of the details with you today.
No, it's brilliant. I suppose the benefit is for the audience knowing that you're on sabbatical right now. You're in the Premiership of Nevis, but
Yes,
you're also a lawyer. So you understand that it's not just about the ideas, but it's the regulatory enforcement of those ideas.
absolutely.
So let's down chunk the whole concept at this moment in time. So out of the 48 countries that we pinged this out to, we had a lot of questions coming in from the likes of the guys at State Street through to family offices, through to Morgan Stanley and some big law firms. One of the questions here were strict environmental and social standards look good on paper, but enforcement is often where things fall short. How will your administration ensure those rules have real teeth against powerful developers? And I think that's probably speaks more in line with a couple of the CBI things that have taken place right the way
Right,
across the Caribbean.
right. So I think that's an excellent question, and I'm going to be blunt with you. Part of our problem in small island states is capacity. I joke with my friends all the time, and I say that sometimes if you need a particular doctor, there may actually be only one person in the entire country who has that expertise because we're so small. And so oftentimes we have to rely on expertise from outside and to bring people in, an environmental czar, for example, somebody who's going to come in and assist us. So we're very open to that. I think, however, that every developmental sort of thrust starts with the idea. So you have to first have the idea, then you fashion the framework. And then I think what this question is talking about now is how do you monitor and how do you enforce? And I think that comes down to getting the right people, having the right framework, getting the right people, and showing the level of seriousness. And I think that that seriousness comes from political will. When we engage with developers, as you say, quite powerful developers, people who are very well financed, sometimes having uh, you know um, checkbooks, I would say, and profit and loss statements that are much bigger than the country that they're coming to invest in. So we understand that. I mean, when you look at major companies, say a company like Microsoft, I mean, their bottom line is much bigger than most countries in the world. So the reality is that we understand the power dynamic, but it really comes back to political will. And we know that for an island our size, sustainability is critical. Absent sustainability, we will simply disappear. And so this is not just a fireside chat. This is not just an armchair discussion. This for us is our survival. We must be sustainable. We must do more in terms of food security. We must ensure that we wean ourselves off the dependence on fossil fuels for energy. We must have water security, whether through desalination or other mechanisms. But the reality is that we are on the front line of that. There are other countries which perhaps can endure if some part of their country was to become unsustainable, but we simply don't have that luxury.
But I suppose the luxury that you have is coming back to the question is measurability to ensure that you have got regulations that can be enforced and
Yes,
will be enforced. And you said it's
yes,
underpinned by political will. Obviously, you are a person who has been at the forefront, not just across, in my mind, St. Kitts and Nevis, but across the Caribbean. You've been bold enough to make very strong statements backed up by what you've been able to achieve in Nevis, a very
yes.
small country, bringing the amount of tourism that you are. But there's only one of you, Mark. And that's the reality of it, in all due respect.
Mhm.
How would you ensure then that political maturity continues, let's say, for example, the next elections or elections after that, that people will adhere to the policies and the legal makeup of a nation to ensure that any developer that does do a development that doesn't meet the right level of scrutiny will be punished?
Well, that's always the question. And I think you've hit the nail squarely on the head, as we would say colloquially here, because that is the reality. Do you continue? Even in great democracies in the world, great countries like the United States, we see the difference that can happen when one administration changes to another. Different ideas, different philosophies, different approaches, especially in relation to the environment. One president, for example, in the United States took the United States into the Paris Accords. Another president said, no, the US should not be a part of that. So we appreciate, and I think that question is a very legitimate question. I think what my job is as the person who is currently in that chair as the leader of this island is in my statements, in my actions, and in our efforts at education that we mainstream our ideas about sustainability to say to everyone, sustainability is not a political issue. Sustainability is a survival issue for nation states like ours that are so small. And so for us, it's critical that that messaging be mainstream. So whether it's in our schools, our primary schools, our high schools, our school institution of higher learning, whether it's in our healthcare system, our education system more broadly, you name it, our construction sector, we are talking about sustainability and we're putting things in place to the point where, and I will tell you, there has been pushback. I'll give you a good example. We recently decided to ban single-use plastics. Why? Because single-use plastics ultimately find their way into the ocean. They find their way into marine life. And as an island, naturally, the ocean and the marine environment is very important to us. And there were howls of protests from some quarters, especially people who are small business people who are saying, well, I'm accustomed to putting something in a plastic bag. What am I going to do now? But we have continued with the relentless education, relentless public relations exercise to show people why this is important. And if it comes at a temporary inconvenience to us, that's a small price to pay for longer term sustainability for our country. And I think our people are coming around. We now have our children involved in campaigns in relation to that. We have now a very, very, endearing recycling program with plastic bottles that has taken hold. Nevis is now crushing these bottles and exporting them to be repurposed. There's a lot that's happening here, and I think that that can only happen with the relentless effort to educate. And so it's not quite the full answer to your question, but I think insofar as other administrations or other individuals, it is my hope that they would even be more interested in sustainability than perhaps I am, because I think that's the only way we survive.
Well, I think this jumps onto another question that was provided from the guys at Seoul. It was many global developments have used and labeled sustainable as a marketing tool without truly living up to it. How
Yes.
will Nevis make sure this zone sets a higher bar and avoids greenwashing?
So I think that that again is an excellent question, but the difference is, Rajan, that many people who label something as sustainable may not necessarily need to ensure that it's sustainable because at the end of the day, they feel that it doesn't really have an impact. In Nevis, we again go into our size. Nevis is 36 square miles, only 13,500 people. We are tiny.
Yeah.
We aren't even a blip in most big cities in the world. And I say, therefore, that everything that happens here has an impact that is visible, that is discernible, an impact that clearly everyone sees and feels. And so there is no escaping here. There's no effort to say, well, I'm just greenwashing this. I'm just saying it's sustainable, put it all over my billboards and my advertising. But I'm going to do the exact opposite because the consequences of that for us as a people are very real. And this is the point that I keep making, even in the overall debate about climate change and where we are, that for some, this is academic. There's still people out there who are debating whether climate change is real. There's still some debating whether or not temperature rises are caused by, efforts and man-made efforts. We don't have those luxuries. We are in a position where every year, starting in the 1st of June, we're in the hurricane season.
Yeah.
And as a leader, I tell you, there can be nothing more humbling, let me use that language, than to be in a hurricane season knowing that there's absolutely nothing you can do but pray because you have no control whatsoever over what's going to happen. We have sargassum in a region in the Caribbean where we depend so heavily on tourism. We have this sargassum that is growing wildly in our oceans because of the additional temperatures, the increased temperatures of the ocean, and that are polluting our beaches all around the region. Thankfully, in Nevis, it is not that big a problem because of our geography, but in our sister St. Kitts, in St. Lucia, in other islands, it's a huge, huge issue with sargassum, and we are having to adapt. And so for us, I go back to the word I've been using, this is survivability. So there is for us an urgent imperative for us to act and act as one with one accord as a people if we are going to survive. And so that sense, and there's no instinct, as you know, as powerful as survival.
Yeah.
We as a people need to ensure that these projects are done properly, and we need to hold the project developers accountable because it speaks to our very existence and our ability to survive.
And I think the beauty of Nevis is the fact that you're too small to hide.
Absolutely.
Anybody that goes in, it is one of those islands, and culturally it is very different from the sister islands out there as well. It brings me back to a couple of other questions here. One is, as you rightly said, the hurricanes. I was in St. Kitts in 2017 when we got hit, the first Cat 5 hurricanes on the outsides. And here's one of the questions. It says, you've seen the devastation of Category 5 hurricanes firsthand across the region. What resilient strategies are being built to ensure this billion-dollar vision can withstand future climate shocks? And I think what they're hinting at is we saw what took place in Barbuda, where the whole island was flattened. So if we
Yes.
are going to be building real resilient structures on this sustainable free zone, the chances are, no matter how resilient they are, Cat 5 hurricane does a lot more devastation than any of us can imagine. How do you deal with that?
So it's always man against nature, and we understand that man against nature, nature usually wins. It's just
Absolutely.
such a reality. But I think that, again, going back to the legislative framework, it has been quite ingenious because it has built into the legislative framework those types of issues
Oh,
of
brilliant.
sustainability. So, for example, developers have to demonstrate that they're building to a particular level, building that could withstand up to Cat 5 hurricanes. They must demonstrate that they're building in resilience in terms of the development. So the road infrastructure, the power infrastructure, they have to demonstrate that they're building in resilience in terms of water.
This
How
is
are they going to generate water? How are they going to generate electricity? Up to 70% has to be renewable. These are the types of things that we have done. Now, can I sit here and tell you that if a Cat 5 storm, or some now are saying that Cat 5 isn't even an appropriate measure because some storms are even more violent than a Cat 5, if that were to come through with a direct hit, that I could guarantee that our better building codes and our efforts would ensure that we're okay? Probably not. Then that's why I say sometimes during that type of season, all we can do is pray, frankly, and ask God to just ensure that this year we don't get hit. Thankfully, we have not had a direct hit in St. Kitts and Nevis in the past decade. But the truth is that this is a risk that we run. And it is not the only risk, might I add, because you have the risk of drought, you have the risk of torrential rainfall, patterns of rains are changing. You know, you have the risk of sargassum that I spoke of earlier. And so, and even in terms of our food security, in terms of how we build out our societies to ensure sustainability and survivability, that all of that comes into play. So I can't, and as a leader, it would be foolhardy of me to guarantee, but what I can say is that we've built into the legislative framework that whatever is constructed has to be constructed at a level that allows at least a fighting chance if these types of storms were to come.
There's another storm that has been brewing off the shores of not just the Caribbean, but globally, and that is the fact of the US's stance on climate commitments. Now, one of the questions that came in on multiple occasions from different people across the globe, from Malaysia, from the UK, and from India, is the following. And it is, with the US pulling back on climate commitments and the global capital being so fickle, how do geopolitical changes affect the feasibility of this zone? And how will Nevis keep the free zone attractive for investors while avoiding overdependence of outside aid or political structures? It's a bit of a
I don't,
mouthful.
yeah, I don't think that the zone, the way we've conceptualized it, really and truly, what we're looking for are investors with the capacity to deliver on such a zone. I don't think that there is any significant impact by US policy, which has been demonstrated, may change again in another 3.5 years. We don't know where US policy is going from day to day. It changes. And that is, of course, every country orders their affairs as they see fit. That is their sovereign right. We are not seeking to create any structures here that are dependent on the US or US policy, or frankly, dependent on the political environment, we are trying, and that is part of my own conversation with our people, that one of the things we are seeking to do with these zones and other efforts that we're making, for example, our geothermal exploration, is really to insulate ourselves from a lot of these exogenous shocks over which we have no control. You know, when we sat and we looked at the news and we saw that Israel had attacked Iran, and thereafter the United States decided to attack Iran, I will tell you, despite not despite, but in addition to the concerns about the world and safety and security in our world, my immediate concern as a leader of a small island was the cost of fuel. Iran is a major producer of oil. We have war in Ukraine involving Russia, another major producer of oil. We have Venezuela, another major producer of oil, having difficulties there with their administration and with concerns being expressed by certain Western powers. When we look at all of that, that translates in a very real way to the single mother in a village here in Nevis having to pay more for electricity. And if she has to pay more for electricity, it means that she pays more in the supermarket, she pays more for bread from the bakery. It is more expensive for her to send her children to school. So these global events, I think sometimes they're viewed in that macro sense. I try to break them down and say, what is their impact at the micro level on our people? And therefore, it behooves us who are in leadership positions to do what we can to insulate ourselves from those things. Nobody's going to ask a little country like St. Kitts and Nevis, what do you think about war in Ukraine or war in Gaza? Our voice, while it's an important voice, we understand that it's only through the collective capacity of multilateralism that we even have a voice.
Yeah.
And so we don't have the power, we don't have the might. And so for us who are minnows in a world of sharks, we have to determine how do we protect ourselves. And one of the best ways, I think, is for us to develop policies which are clever, which are agile, which allowed us, one of the things that small islands, small countries, small animals have usually is speed. You can adjust quickly, you can develop quickly, you can create new ideas. You mentioned citizenship by investment. I have said to many of my friends around the world, the Citizenship by Investment program was created in St. Kitts and Nevis. Way back in 1984, we gave the world the idea of leveraging citizenship for investment. Other countries, large and small, have followed suit and have done a variation of it, but the idea emanated from us. And this is, I think, the same with the sustainable zone idea that we have created. And I expect that others in the Caribbean will follow suit. So currently what we need is the right developer, the developer who is aligned with us in terms of what we're seeking to achieve, and the developer who has the capacity in terms of financial capacity to develop on this project. That's what we're seeking to do. I mentioned geothermal, and just if I can briefly say that we are well advanced now. We are at the stage where we're reviewing bids on the production well drilling. And I'm very excited about that because the science tells us that we have far more power than we can consume. And so the science is telling us that under Nevis, we have up to 1,000 megawatts of geothermal power. To put that in context for you and your listeners, Nevis and St. Kitts together only consume about 50 megawatts at peak. So we're talking about a potential of hundreds of megawatts of available energy for other purposes, whether that's to export to neighboring islands or it's power to X, to power up industries that require cheap renewable energy. So what does that do, however? It means that as I'm watching global news of what's going on in the rest of the world, that single mother that I spoke of can be a bit more comfortable in her home, knowing that her price of fuel is not going to depend on who's at war and who's having difficulties with their neighbor. That peace of mind is also, in my humble opinion, part of the sustainability puzzle. Allowing our people to understand that decisions are being made at the governmental level, which are designed to ensure the longevity of our people, ensure the survivability of our people, because a lot of what we experience is frankly existential. A lot of the threats that we see, climate change being one of them, is existential. Other countries can maybe, if California were to have a problem, people can move to Texas, they can move to New York. There's no place in Nevis for us to move to. This is all we have. And it therefore, with a certain level of urgency, we have to address and confront these types of issues and mainstream sustainability throughout all that we do.
All right, let's get the pitch on then. So we've got an audience in over 48 countries. We've got in excess of over 63 billion in terms of private net worth of the people listening in. And these guys are some of the biggest investors out there. And I believe you met a few of them over at the cricket match.
Yes.
60 seconds, we're in the shard and we're going up. I've always taught by a couple of good friends of mine who are arbitrators that if you can't sell your product in 60 seconds, then you haven't got a product. So Mark, I'm giving you the baton, being a seasoned lawyer, but also a very dear friend and a custodian of where Nevis is heading to. Here's your 60-second pitch and invite them from the financial hubs from Mumbai through to London, through to also having a look at New York. Why should they get involved in what you have?
I think they should get involved if they're interested in sustainability, if they're interested in a lifestyle that allows them freedom, freedom to engage. I have committed to making Nevis the best place in the world to live, to work, to raise your families. We want to create a society here that allows people the things that ultimately I think matter most: the ability to live at peace, the ability to live with each other, the ability to raise your families and see your families grow. To do that, we need to be a sustainable island. We need fresh air, we need fresh water, we need food, we need security. And we are working on achieving all that. Our energy security is well on the way. Our food security we continue to work at. And these zones is just the latest iteration in our attempt to diversify the economy and create real opportunities on the island of Nevis. So if you're interested in an island that, as I like to say, is how the Caribbean used to be, then come to Nevis. See what we're doing in Nevis. It's a fascinating island where modernity has come, luxury is our byword, but we still remain the quintessential Caribbean. And so I invite you, you've been here, brother, and invite others to come and see what we're doing here. I think it's a very exciting time in our little island and our little country.
Mark, it is an absolute pleasure. And I can testify to that. I think out of the many countries that I've been to, the one that still stands very deeply within my heart is Nevis. And in particular, I think it's the only country that you can go to where whilst you're crossing the road, people will stop the car and politely say, "You go first." I remember even going in from the speedboat, the gentleman offered me his car to drive around. He said, "Well, you
Yes.
can't drive anywhere else." And I think that's what makes it special. I also think in the time of economic turmoil, what you've done is extremely intelligent because not only are you dealing with energy, and energy is the mother lode of all our technological needs, from data
Absolutely.
centers to also the fact that Nevis, in terms of legislation, stands its weight in the ring. You are fiercely independent. So that means for the likes of data centers or companies involved in those areas, it seems that you've hit the nail on the head, or as you rightly mentioned before, you got access to incredible amounts of energy. You've got a legal system that is robust, that is fiercely independent.
Absolutely.
On top of that, you have a government there, and I'm not saying it just because it's Nevis, but you got a government that is fiercely also pro-business, not to the detriment of its own local population, and that's a really nice balancing act. And so you're almost in the right place at the right time, at the right level of urgency globally. I guess a lot of people will be asking, Mark, why are people not flocking over to Nevis at this moment in time? Why are people not understanding more about what your opportunities are, especially on the international scale, where you have a plethora of big funds out there that are willing, open, and able to invest within these areas?
I think the answer to that is simply awareness. And that's part of why I think these conversations with persons like you who shape public opinion are so important. Many people, I think, are simply unaware of what the opportunities might be in the Caribbean generally and in little islands like Nevis. And I think that the bigger countries in the Caribbean naturally attract more attention. But I keep saying to the discerning investor, the discerning traveler, the person who's looking for something truly special and a special opportunity to come take a look at St. Kitts and Nevis. I think we're punching well above our weight. We have all the things you've mentioned, incredibly well-run country, a country that's growing and emerging, and one that has had one of the fastest growing economies in the Caribbean for many, many years. And so come take a look at us. Come have a conversation with us. We are very much pro-business. I have said in many of my speeches that there's a sign that hangs over Nevis which says open for business. And that's what we're seeking to do, to grow our economy, to ensure, again, going back to my example, that that single mother in Jessops, in Gingerland, that that single mother has what she needs to raise her children with dignity, and that those children can become members of the society who are contributing positively to the development of our country. That's my goal. And to do that, we need the right policies, we need the right partners.
Absolutely. Mark, pleasure to have you on this morning.
Thank you so much, brother. It is good to see you and good to talk to you. And I say thank you to the audience as well. And believe me, Nevis is the place to be. I suggest you come take a look.
Bullish as always. Good.
Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.